Hi everyone, thanks for taking the time to watch this. Um, so the reason for this video is that we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to think about the conceptual framework before we all meet in London. So to do this, the 9 people in the Work Package 1 team who were listed on the slide have spent a long time in the last few weeks clearing the ground, going through and discussing a lot of the issues, trying to make some progress and to set out the really important decisions that we want everyone to take part in London. Um, do remember that this framework is for all of us, and we really want everyone to feel ownership of it, to use it, and to develop it over the coming years. So please do think about whether this makes sense and whether it will work for you. So let's start just by explaining the conceptual model bit by bit. And we're going to start with the most important bit of it, which are the welfare experiences bit about how things feel. So this includes 2 parts. There's emotions and thoughts, and then there's the dimensions of experiences. Um, these are things like stigma. We'll come back to the list at the end, but you can see stigma is a sort of a concept that people think with, researchers use, people receiving benefits use, but it's different to emotions for 2 reasons. One of them is that stigma just isn't an emotion. Shame is an emotion, but that's different from stigma. And in fact, stigma doesn't always lead to shame. Sometimes benefit claiming may be stigmatized, but people don't feel shame because they deflect it. Or sometimes stigma will lead to different emotions than shame, such as anger. So we care about emotions. They're really important for us in this project, but dimensions are a different level that's really important for us because they help us make sense of what's going on, which is why they've been so widely used in the way that people talk about the experience of claiming benefits. Now, as well as the welfare experiences bit, we've got this other bit in blue that we've described as conditions and events. So these are things that happen rather than how things feel. And you'll see, some of these things are events and processes. So these are just sort of different sets of things that might happen to you while you're receiving benefits. But the conditions of claiming has a list of conditions which we think probably makes sense to match the list of dimensions of experiences. But the difference between them, if we take a potential dimension like being discriminated against, there's a difference between something feeling discriminatory internally to you as a person receiving benefits and something being discriminatory to some external person looking in at it. And we think it's important to have the space to talk about the way that we might view the system externally separately to the way that people feel about it. If we go back to the example of discrimination, sometimes people may have low expectations or low awareness. So we might think they're being discriminated against, but they don't feel discriminated against. So one of the reasons for looking at the conditions of claiming is it gives us that space to say, well, there's a potential issue here, even beyond the way that people feel about it. In doing this, though, it's important to be really clear. There's no view from nowhere. There's no kind of natural, set of conditions of claiming or some objective way of looking at it. These are ways that we need to think about and argue about and defend in saying, we think that this treatment is discriminatory or this treatment is stigmatizing. But nevertheless, we thought it was useful to talk about it. So the welfare experiences bit and the conditions and events bit are probably the 2 most important parts of the conceptual framework. But there's a few quick further things we wanted to flag. So firstly, you'll see this pink box is about past experiences and current expectations. So that's just a way of flagging that these things don't happen in a sort of a neat linear way. The things that happen to you and how you feel then affect the way that you're going to feel about things in future. And in fact, these things can happen in quite complicated ways. So just having that part of the framework is a sort of a sign that we're trying to take time into account in a more complex way than we can easily show in a single image. It's also worth flagging social protection income. This is not our main focus in the project, but it's obviously crucial and it must be a part of our model. Starting to get a little bit more complex now, but again, really important to flag that different people will have different things that happen, and they will also feel differently about the things that happen. And a thing that I think we're all committed to in the project is being concerned with, inequalities in experiences, as well as just looking at average or typical experiences. So that's what that bit of the conceptual model is there for. Now, to influence the policy agenda, we're going to need to link all of this to outcomes. Things like how people behave in terms of their claim, in terms of work, mental health, physical health, and so on. This isn't going to be our focus in London, but it's important that it's there and important for the project as a whole. Similarly, to influence the policy agenda, we're going to need to link all of these things back to decisions that are taken about the social protection system, all sorts of different decisions that are being taken, and also some wider factors. This isn't our focus in London, but it is really important. So again, really important that it's there. So you can see the whole model here looks quite complicated when you just see the whole thing. But hopefully it's simple enough if I talk you through it bit by bit. That was our goal in doing the video. But what we'd like feedback on is around whether this framework is clear and whether it's useful, both useful in academic work and useful in policy or wider work. Frameworks aren't really true or false in a narrow sense. There's too many other decisions that are being taken. Individual claims can be true or false, but a conceptual framework can't be really. So the really important things are, is this clear enough to use and is it useful? We're going to discuss this in London, but really good if you can start thinking about that already. The other really important part of the discussion in London is around all of the different dimensions of experience, which are also the same as the list of conditions of claiming. And currently, we've developed a long list of 35 different dimensions based on the conversations with claimants that you've all helped with, plus an academic literature review. So you'll see, I know the text is quite small here, I'll give you the link to all of this in the next slide. But you can see the first one is, a high versus low time burden, whether it's demanding versus easy, whether the system is making impossible demands or manageable demands, and so on. And you can see that the way we've labeled these dimensions is as two opposing extremes. But obviously, these are a sliding scale, and lots of people's experiences will fall in the middle of them. So we'd like you to think about two things in terms of this list of dimensions before London. And again, we're going to have time to discuss them in London as well. Firstly, you'll see the link there, which will also be in the email I send. So have a look at the full list of dimensions and have a think, are there any dimensions missing of the sort of things that you're dealing with in your work or that you know about? And there'll be a space to add to that list of dimensions at the meeting in London. Going in the other direction, though, our major task in London in some ways is trying to group these dimensions and to agree the framework as a whole, or at least the initial version of the framework, because obviously it will change as the project continues and other people outside of the project will contribute to that too. But still, 35 dimensions is probably too many for this to be usable. So we're going to try and group them, and helpful for you to have a bit of a think about that in advance. Although again, there will be plenty of time for you to be doing interactive exercises on this in London. So just to say very many thanks for watching this 10-minute video. Hopefully this helped understand how the conceptual framework in its current form looks, and we're really looking forward to discussing this with you in London really soon.